back in the garage, back in the garage, back in the garage today, back in the garage today. What's up guys, back in the garage today, working on my 2017 KTM 250 XCF. Got a bunch of maintenance to do to it. Well, one of the things you need to know how to do is how to remove the fuel tank, because later on I'm going to be changing out the spark plug and also checking the valve clearance on the bike, and I need to get the fuel tank off in order to do that. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this video. Now the first thing we need to do in order to remove the fuel tank is remove the seat. That's done using I've just got an 8mm T-handle. You can also use a Torx bit. On the newer bikes, there's only one screw that goes all the way across and it's accessible from the left-hand side of the bike. On my bike, there's a screw on each side, so we're gonna get those out first. And then with the screws removed, the seat just pops right out of there. One thing I like to do to make sure I don't lose the screws is to just go ahead and thread them back in to the seat. Then we're just gonna set the seat aside out of the way. All right, so with the seat removed, this is the back of the fuel tank right here. We need to unplug the connector to the fuel pump. Just get that undone, easy enough. All right, so next up we need to unplug the fuel line. This is done by just pressing this piece in and this comes apart. Just make sure everything is clean around here, because the last thing we want to have happen is get dirt in the fuel line, because that would not be good. You can see there I've got it apart. All you do is press in on this and then just pull this hose out, and let's move on to the next step. All right, so we've got these tank shrouds, or spoilers as KTM calls them. Now these are hooked on to both the fuel tank and up here on the radiator. So if we come up here, I'm actually missing one there, but we should have two. You've got one right there, and then if you have it, there's another one down here. So there's four total, two on each side. We're gonna grab an 8mm and pull those out and then move on to the next step. Back up to the top of the fuel tank, if we look right down in there, we see we've got another 8mm and a rubber bushing. We need to pull this screw out of there, and then we're almost done. All right, so we've got all the fasteners disconnected. Undo your breather hose here, so that's off. Then the only other thing we really need to do is pull these tank shrouds out so they're not being held on to the radiator, and then we should just be able to lift this bad boy right off of here and get it out of our way. And there's what it looks like with the tank off. Extremely dirty. All right, so putting your fuel tank back on the bike, it's pretty much the reverse order, but what I would recommend doing, since the tank sits down on those little rubber grommets, go ahead and make sure they're cleaned up on both sides. And also clean underneath your tank. There will be dirt and grime up under there, and that's what's gonna lead to rubbing the paint and stuff off here, just the added friction. So take a little time to clean up your tank shrouds and everything while it's off the bike. It's easy to do, and then we'll get to putting it back on. All right, so we're gonna grab our tank and start to set it back down here into place. Make sure this plug back here that you got to plug back in is out of the way. You might have to pull your shrouds out a little bit to make sure they clear. And just make sure it's got a good tight seat. If you want, you can go ahead and hook up your breather hose right there. Now make sure your shrouds are out over the radiator where they belong. And then we're gonna take this rubber bushing and bolt, and that's gonna go right back down here in the center of the tank. I'm sure there's probably a torque spec on that, but just tighten it down. Now, since we're back here, we may as well go ahead and hook up this connector. I would recommend taking a little bit of dielectric grease on the connection ends there. That'll just help seal out water, and since these dirt bikes take a lot of abuse, make sure we have a really good connection back here. With the fuel pump reconnected, we have two 8mm screws that go in on this side. Most people will have two that go in on this side, but my shroud's cracked, so I only have one. So we're gonna get those put in next. All right, the last thing we need to do on the tank itself is hook up the fuel line. Now you get this little O-ring around here. I'm gonna put just a small dab of grease on it, and then these two pieces just click back together. And the fuel line's been reconnected. The last thing we need to do is put the seat back on the bike. You see there's this little groove cut in here. That's gonna slide up over, or actually, this is gonna be over top of that groove. Get that situated there. We also have these two pieces that slide up underneath the tank to help hold the seat in place. And then finally we have to put the seat bolts back in place. While I normally take them out with an 8mm T-handle, I use a T30 bit to put them back in because it just helps hold it in place a little bit better than the ratchet or socket does. Alright guys, so that's how you remove and then reinstall the fuel tank on a 2017 KTM 250 XCF. It's very similar on most of the other dirt bikes. Once you get it down, it's like a 5-minute job to get it off, 5-minute job to get it back on. So whether you need to change out a spark plug, check your valves, whatever you may need to do underneath the frame there on top of the engine, you can get to it relatively simply just by popping that fuel tank off. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, considering that subscribe button because if you like motorcycles, well, this is the place to be. If you have any questions about removing or installing the tank, obviously let me know those down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them. And as always, I'll talk to you again soon.